while we're getting set up, I would just like to say, you know, in war, you orient on the battle. You go to where the guns are. And you don't go where they want you to go. You go where the threat is. Political warfare is warfare. Fair enough? Political warfare is warfare. And it must be treated that way. As you're getting a sense for right now, it is designed to escalate in intensity along lines and conditions that's most favorable to them and most disfavorable to you. And so long as you don't have a gauge on how they're escalating, you cannot control escalations or de-escalations. I'm good right here. I can just do that. And so I think it's important. This speech today is going to be the hammer and anvil speech of all the Platonic briefings I've given. I've been building up to it. There's a lot of stuff you have to clear the ground for. It is the hammer and anvil brief of all the dialectical arguments. You've seen this. You've lived it. You just don't understand what it is. And I want to try to bring some clarity to it. There is an architecture to what I'm going to explain, and that can be attacked. So what I'd like to first say is unconstrained analytics is a subsidiary of Cassandra, Inc. Now, that's a joke, but Cassandra was a beautiful, beautiful woman, the sister of Helen of Troy. And, of course, the most beautiful god, Apollo, was smitten by her, so he gave her a present. What was the present? The perfect gift of prophecy. Well, thinking that he, made his mark with her, he goes up to warm up to her, and she says, no, most beautiful God, I got my own life to live. I'm not interested in you. And he was not happy with that. Well, in the nature of these mythologies, the god cannot take back his gift. So what he did is he added a curse to it. And the curse was that nobody will believe your perfect prophecy. And that carries throughout Cassandra's life during the Trojan War, where everybody was told what's going to happen. And that is the reality of unconstrained analytics. The dubious task of unconstrained analytics is to provide people with solutions to problems they wish they didn't have and pretend that don't. So what we're going to do is we're going to go deep into the whole Platonic nightmare at the center of the whole thing. And what's really important to know is that going all the way back to then, it's all about narratives, controlling narratives. The control of how you talk will control how you will act. And of course, those narratives today cascade into mass line discussions, as then as now. And here you see right here, chapter 11 of Mao's little red book, The Mass Line. So one of the things you can see here, I wanted to pick it out, is when you succeed at a mass line attack where you have awoken a population from the slumber of their culture, okay, they awaken, or they are woke. That's what woke means. And by the way, for people say, I've heard it said other ways. That's wrong. This is what it is. Woke is when your culture has been destroyed. So what I'm going to do is going to go through this one brief and large. It's about the only full quote I'm going to read because that's the center of everything. The abuse of language leads to the abuse of power. The sophists, Plato says, fabricate a fictitious reality, the existential realm of which man could be taken over by pseudo-realities whose fictitious nature threatens to become indiscernible, and it's truly a depressing thought. And yet, the Platonic nightmare, I hold, possesses an alarming contemporary relevance. For the general public is being reduced to a state where people are not only unable to find out about the truth, but also to become unable to even search for the truth because they are satisfied with deception and trickery that have determined their convictions. If we had time in this briefing, the next 2 slides would be Bezmenov. And what would he say? This is the core of demoralization campaigns. Okay, why did he talk about this? Because it was the abuse of language that allowed the Marxists to take control of the Bolsheviks. It was the abuse of language, okay, by Nazis that allowed them to take power. Who owns the language? Who owns the culture? So we're turning now into Lenin. And what's the key point to know about Lenin? He tells you the dialectics is a theory of knowledge, a theory of knowledge. Okay, it's not only a theory of knowledge, it's a theory of knowledge of Hegel and Marx. And it is not only an aspect of Marxism, it is the essence of it. Why is that important? Because you can know everything you can to read about Marxism minus the dialectic, and you know nothing in terms of fighting it. You can know nothing about Marxism but understand the dialectic that they grafted from Hegel, and you can figure out everything they're saying as you're learning Marxism. How do I know that's true? Well, because he says it, okay? He goes on and tells you that knowledge doesn't happen in a straight line. It happens in circles. It happens in spiraling circles like a helix. I just want people to get a sense for the fact that we know that they know what the dialectic is, and it's exactly what we're saying, and it's not anything else. So what's going on here is not knowing that is not understanding what they say, even if they tell you to your face. So here we have first things. From a political warfare, for any warfare, if you get the enemy's threat doctrine wrong, everything is going to fail. And I think we've been failing for the last 25 years. I think we don't even do it because we are so assured that we're so powerful, we don't need to do it for something like that. And I just have a little quote from Aristotle there saying, a mistake at the very beginning leads to 10,000-fold later. There's no moving forward without negotiating this. So in 2019 at the Long March, Rich Higgins and I introduced people to political warfare. And we focused on a man named Marcuse. We had Hegel there, we have Marx, we have Mao, but the Maoist insurgency model in America was basically released by him. We also introduced the concept of mass line in a graphic that looked at how it looked when it's attacking America. Exactly 1 year to the month, that graphic was executed to perfection, exactly as we said it was coming. You had Marxist critical philosophy, the people was made to be terrified at itself. That got reconfigured in modern day Marxism as political philosophy became critical theory. Critical theory breaks down to intersectional lines of effort. One intersectional line of effort is critical race theory. It then became converted to a mass line that Black Lives Matter executed. It intimidated citizens, it silenced the Republicans, and it neutralized the FBI. That is how a revolutionary attack works when you're unopposed. Unopposed. Okay? So then in 2022, at the Globalist Puppet Master, we tried to raise the specter, but stop saying uniparty. You are prisoners of the language that traps you in an understanding of events that keeps you from seeing it. And I wanted people to see this is an oligarchy. As a matter of fact, it's an oligarchy just like in Plato's Republic. In fact, because it's an oligarchy, the next thing that comes up is a democracy. And of course, this summer or last fall, we briefed that Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution says we are a republic. A republic is not a democracy. And yet both the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, and all social media are forcing the use of the word democracy. Okay? Democracies are not preferred forms of government. They're deformed republics. And yet, like what I want to get at to disagree is to be wrong. Hey, Steve, we don't talk about it that way. I know you don't. But those words have been defined for a couple thousand years. So what you have here, going into it, also at the War on Women, we pointed out that in 1955, Herbert Marcuse wrote Eros and Civilization. Eros and Civilization was pointing to Plato's Symposium. So in 1955, when he had this quote, okay, where he said, the road to higher culture leads to the love of boys, you should know LGBT became a part of the Marxist attack mechanism in 1955. And it's going to go along the way you see being discussed in, of course, the symposium. We also pointed out that we could go all the way back to, what is it, Book 5 of the Republic, and it was the state should take over the raising of children and it should destroy the family. And of course, this was about how radical feminism is about the destruction of families. So here we are, we're getting to the Republic, the divided line, and critical theory. So, what I want to do here, as I do this, is point out that of all the things that have been briefed, this is the hammer and anvil, I've already said that. It is the archetype, or as in Greek, archetypos. That's where it comes from. It's the archetype of this attack is what you're going to see here. Okay? But if something is an archetype form, in the military parlance, it is a doctrinal template. If we could create a doctrinal template of what a threat does pure, then we could take that into whatever they're going to do, and whatever we're going to do, we could just populate the field of their functions. The pure and then applied. That's how it's done. And because you could do that, you could create a decision support template that says, when we see them do that, they're doing this, and we hit that. Okay? It means you could target them. You could target them, and the target you hit isn't what they wanted you to react to, it's them. And so I think it's important to recognize this form. I'm going to be very quick here, going through the construction of this divided line, because it's not a class on Plato, okay? Pure. So the Son is the offspring of the good in a proportion. Create the intelligible realm and the visible realm. The visible realm is the world you see, you can touch, you can smell, okay? Draw a line that divides the intelligible and the visible realms unevenly in two. At the bottom of the visible realm, place images, phantasms on water. Now, if you see in small print there, it says phantasmata and udari, or reflections on water, or phantasms on water. I want you to remember that because this seems to be at the bottom of this divided line, and its positioning will matter. Add the likeness of things on top of that. So at the top of the visible realm, above images, is likenesses. I see a cat, I draw a cat. I see you, I draw you. I see a house, I draw a house. Then you have hypothesis. Let me stamp my feet. Yes, this is where the concept of science comes. Hypothesis. And what do they say? Moving to the intelligible realm, allow your mind to imitate the images in order to formulate hypotheses about them. What does that mean? I see a man. I see a woman. I see kids. My mind intuits a family. I see a whole bunch of people like that. My mind intuits a culture. We now could create laws for this culture in this form of thinking. And then after that, now at the top of the divided line, move on to thinking beyond hypothesis, to thinking without images. I don't want to think about anything I've ever seen, touched, heard, or smelled. I just want to think. Right? That's pretty true. The divided line can be understood as intellection at the top, understanding, trust or belief, or imagination, picture, thinking, or conjecture. Please keep an eye on these upper two ones. These two are the build, as the build continues. The word dianoia there is the lesser understanding, concept of understanding. This will develop into something very real when we get to it. The term for intellection as we progress in these slides is episteme. Episteme is a word that means science. Okay? It is the higher form of reasoning you can be called reason in this paradigm. And just to be clear, you can take the Greek and translate it into Latin. Episteme is scientia. Scientia is science. It's clean, no matter how you do it. Why? Because what you have here is episteme is the actual term that's used here, and there we have it in the document. We put the Greek in there. The word they use that because it becomes very contentious for reasons we're not going to get into today. So intellection is at the top, and opinion is at the bottom. So there seems to be a difference in this divided line between what constitutes what you know and what you can think you know, right? And oh, by the way, let me just point this out. Doxa is that Greek word for opinion. Do you know what a true opinion or a true belief is? It is a orthodoxa or orthodox. Okay? True belief. Interesting how that goes. And then, of course, you have being. Intellection is the realm of being, opinion the realm of becoming. Why is this important? This understanding of the nature of the world has been practically erased from the modern world. And it means you can't quite get around to how Christians really understand things or how the ancient world understand things. I'll give you an example. There's Moses walking around. He sees this bush burning. He says, hey, who are you? And God being God says, I'm not going to give you my name. I'm not going to give you power over me. I am who I am. I am being. I exist outside of time. I exist outside of space. I exist eternally present. You are becoming. You exist in time and in space. And so that word, genesis, meaning coming to be, Genesis becomes in the beginning of God creating time and the universe. Interesting? So that's actually really true. This sets up another analogy. And we're going to pass the analogy because here you have what you can know from no senses, and what's left is hypothesis, likeness, and images. But then what happens is once you reach the dialectical manner of thinking, you're now supposed to destroy the hypothesis. That's kind of strange. The power of the dialectic alone reveals the true and real, and there is no other way. So destroying the hypothesis means you've destroyed anything you learned in what we would call science, what you would call what I see, what I hear, what I figured out. Not to understand the dialectic is to be unintelligent. Please remember this. I have it right down below there. You can see I'm taking it right out of the book. Meaning, if you're not operating here, you're stupid. And by the way, as we progress down that knowledge curve, the lower you go, the more stupid you are. The more stupid you are, the less we have to believe. He who controls the top of the divided line controls you. They own you. Don't get in there. So, the dialectic is the coping stone of all knowledge. But doesn't the dialectic destroy all knowledge from perception? The coping stone is the top piece in masonry on something. We're going to take this to a turn, don't worry. The dialectic demands that one abandon understanding coming from senses. See? I'm not making it up. So, we're going to set up this final analogy, and I'm going to use it. I apologize for that Greek. That's not intentional, so I put it here. Intellection is to opinion as science is to trust or belief, as understanding is to imagination. Why is that important for you to understand? Because this is what creates the concept of initiate language. You see, once my team knows, okay, meaning I could talk about conjecture and trust, and I'm talking really about science and understanding, and you think I'm talking about that, but my team knows I'm talking about that. Make sense? Initiate language. So, Plato used the divided line to negate Homer and Hesiod. Who the heck cares about that? Well, I'm going to tell you why you should care about it. I'm going to tell you by the time we're over with this, you're going to care about it a lot. Okay? Because the priestess Diotima went up to Socrates and said, you would look to Homer and Hesiod and the other poets which rival the gods. So she's accusing Socrates of that. And what that means is Homer and Hesiod were at the pinnacle of classical Greek mythotheology. They were at the top. To attack them was to, today, attack the Bible. Make sense? Attack the Bible. Okay, and it was understood that way. So here we have the word zelos, and this is just about showing that the word in modern days has been watered down, but if you go to the original KJV or the Catholic Douay Rheims, they translated that word as emulation, and emulation meant to love, the love of superiority, the effort to equal. Why is that important? Because what Diotima accused Socrates of is rivaling the gods. And it was written. So let's go to book 1. We don't have to worry about the text. I just want you to see what we're taking from it. In book 1, Plato accuses Homer of stealing and swearing oaths and honoring thieves. In book 2, he really gets to the point where he said, we have to start censoring these guys, you know, these maker of tales. And then in book 3, he goes even further and says, things that shouldn't be heard, we must supervise, expunge, strike out, and throw out. You see that? Okay. Book 3, at a footnote, you actually see, please, if you have a religious orientation, want to know why your church is going belly up? Socrates' intention is akin to that of certain schools of biblical criticism. It's really the other way around. Are you starting to see this? But you will. So book 10 is the end. Plato's Republic is 10 books. It's only that thick. What does he say here? Well, finally he says, we've gone through this whole thing. Homer and Hesiod are being demoted. They are now third in distance from the king, and they are imitators of something that is otherwise real. In fact, Homer is an imitator of phantasms. Remember I told you phantasms on the water? Right? So what they have done is taken Homer and Hesiod, the most divine books of the classical world in Greece, and relegated to the lowest form of knowledge. In fact, scene in water, shadow painting, and puppeteering. So now you see it. What they did was they reduced it. In the Republic, Plato has Socrates demoting the gods to the lowest level of perception. But wouldn't that be sacrilege in the eyes of the Greeks? Sure. But now think about this. Rubber meeting the road here. In today's parlance, targeting a high-value cultural belief or value for negation is called an intersectional line of effort. Intersectionality. This is where it comes from. And of course, the first thing that happened with Hegel is they attacked churches. They attacked biblical criticism. This started very soon. Platonic penetration of biblical analysis, the Tübingen School in Germany, Hegel's dialectic, higher criticism, Wellhausen, JEDP, and the Q gospel. If you know what I'm talking about, you'll get to that one day, but we're going to stop there because we're talking about Marx. And what I want you to know is this concept of divided line remains the doctrinal template for all textual negation, especially it serves as the doctrinal template of critical theory. Now, I don't want you to take my word for that. We're going to see how we get from Marx to Plato through Hegel. We're quoting Hegel here. It should be mentioned that the meaning of speculation, the meaning of the speculative is to be understood as being what used to be called mystical. And we'll go to the bottom of this quote because we're short on time, from Phaedrus, Plato's Phaedrus. And only a man who correctly handles such reminders and is perpetually initiated into these perfect mysteries is truly perfect. The use of that word telos in 15 different ways there, 5, is really important for you to know. If you don't understand the concept of telos, a whole lot of what you read will not make sense, or will make sense wrong. And of course Marx, and of course Lenin knew that Hegel's stuff was all mystical slush. He wrote it, he said it. But why would he adopt such mystical slush? Because if I own the top of the divided line and I impose my will, all these people will follow me like they thought it was a religion, because it is. And they will follow me to the grave. This is where that comes from, as important. You have intersectionality, which breaks down into critical theory, right? We see that today, and we saw this completely play itself out. Now, of course, the Frankfurt School calls it critical theory, but Marx called it critical philosophy. I like this because it's almost comical. Critical criticism of the criticism of the critical. They're fumbling over themselves as they're talking about the speculative, as they're talking about Hegel. There is no getting this wrong. It's pretty locked in tight. And here we go to Hegel, and he's got a whole section on critical philosophy. And we kind of know where that comes from. And what did Lenin say? Marx did not stop in the 18th century. Materialism, he developed a philosophy of a higher level, especially of the Hegelian system, the achievement of the dialectic. See how that works? Now, what I want you to see here is this is Plato's cave. The divided line is book 6. The cave is book 7. And you'll see, among other things, that those images on the wall in Plato's cave is at the level of picture thinking or images on water. The cave is the original explanation of reality dislocation. Note how Plato's 365 BC cave seamlessly accommodates projectors casting images on a screen. Seamlessly. This is the original matrix. In fact, the matrix is an adaptation of this. This is instant on, but this book takes you down roads that the matrix doesn't. And of course, it is Wi-Fi enabled. Do you see that? Now, some people could get out of the matrix and decide they want to go in, or somebody from outside the matrix comes in and you want to kill them. And of course, Plato said that, and so did the guy who says ignorance is bliss. And that's going to be real. How much time do I have? Do I have about 5 minutes? Oh, so let me do a real quick version. That was the hammer. This is the anvil. Ready? And it is quick. Remember, not understanding the dialectic is to be unintelligent, right? So because the science at the top of the divided line is true and scientific, it is superior to mere understanding or real science, which is right under it. And of course, imagination, and certainly superior to picture thinking, thus asserting the supremacy of science over religion. You see that? And we see that was the first application. Okay, when a counterstate controls upward mobility, even in the sciences, over time the opposition will end up having no authority. What am I talking about here? In 1972, Marcuse wrote The Counter-Revolution, and he basically said we're going to take over colleges and control them. Counterstate operations. We're not at a point where the only people who really are able to get graduate degrees in large numbers are people who are not people who come to these type of forums, right? So the experts will be not you. This is important because it instantiates a narrative that's a direct attack on speech. What is your authority for your opinion? Have you ever heard that? This is going to be criminalized. What is your authority? What gives you the right to have an opinion? Maybe you should just shut up, right? So start to understand what you're hearing because there's nothing random about this. And of course, if you don't believe in that concept of science, you just don't get it. Can I take 2 more minutes? 1? Okay. Okay. So all I want to say is, when you translate that into the German from Hegel, his science of reason is Vernunft, and it is hardwired for 2,005 years to be superior to the science of understanding. And so the divided line is the architecture by which you get hammered. And if you're in the divided line and you're not at the top, you're being crushed. Don't worry about how, so long as you're in there. Thank you.